Asian features, because this happens with mixed race kids also, right?
Hmm.
You look not totally whatever. Therefore, questions of what are you, questions of where are you actually from. No, I'm actually from here.
Hmm.
I feel like this impacts Asians, and I would also group in some people. I would say if they, it depends on like facial characteristics and things, but people who are Hispanic Latino will also like describe similar struggles of you could be fourth generation, whatever, like Latin American, like Mexican American, in the country, and yet people will still treat you like you just got off the boat yesterday, or like,
That's fair. Yeah. Especially if you hold space for your heritage whatsoever.
yeah. And it's tricky because I understand that on the one hand, we don't want to erase our roots and our heritage and our culture. And so we should be proud of that. But I think we
Hmm.
need to recognize this is not a situation where it's pride. This is a
Mm.
situation where we're still playing into the hands of people who have given themselves the authority to dictate that this is an appropriate question because there's a power imbalance.
Fair.
Yeah.
Because it does come, I feel like it comes back to like justifying like the fact that you're here,
Yeah.
and who you are as an American,
Yeah, this is not
essentially.
a question that we would ever ask white Americans,
Yeah. No, God, never.
right?
Yeah, I feel like in the past decade, Asia has opened themselves up
Yeah.
a little bit more to the Western world.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is due to entertainment. It has definitely influenced the culture and the experience of a tourist visiting.
Yeah.
I definitely feel less intimidated now
Mm.
going back to Korea as a Korean adoptee as I might have 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of that has to do with my own comfortability with the culture and my Korean identity as well. But
Mm.
I also know that like it's just more open now.
Yeah. Social
There's
media has also changed everything.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
so many expats that are
Yeah.
living in Korea now. There's, I guess, like this joke that there's more foreigners in Seoul than there are native
I've heard.
people
Yeah.
in
I've
Seoul.
heard.
There's probably going to be more English use there than there
Yeah,
there
there's more
was, right?
integration of English education earlier on for at least kids. So even if adults didn't learn it because maybe they didn't even receive an education or can read, they have kids or grandkids who are learning English and teaching them some words. And yeah, there's a different way that we can now all interact versus I was in China, it was almost 15 years ago. And basically like, that experience was still very much, it was pre social media as we have it today,
Hmm.
meaning like it was still it was like transitioning, but it was still under heavy lockdown and heavy lack of exposure. And like I was in a major city, right? And
Yeah.
so I feel like we need to put things in perspective. The difference between someone in China who has literally lived in a village their whole lives and
Mm.
like raised sheep and saw like the same three Chinese looking faces. It's not just about being foreign. There's so many versions of foreign they've never seen versus in the States, in the DC metro area or like in New York City. Why the hell are people trying to touch my hair? Like, are you kidding me? You know what I mean? So
Yeah, it's different.
that's the difference that I see. And we do not, oh man, we
Well,
can't talk about Europe, but it's the same. It's the same shit. Like, yeah.
it's I think you have mm, pockets of little bubbles, we'll call
Yeah.
them, like that
Oh, yeah.
everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
and it definitely sounds like the non-Asian American interactions compared to like Asian American and even Asian interactions all vary
Hmm.
very differently for you.
Yeah. You have to know how to read the codes of a society. You also have to have a lot of awareness about how your world is being constructed. So whenever we see people who are expats or immigrants or, foreigners in a different country, travel bloggers, whatever, great that they're sharing like moments of their lives. But for instance, if you're moving to a country where currency is valued like way lower than where you're from, and you never stop to ask why that is, and you're just like, oh my God, Thailand is so cheap. Oh my God, in Indonesia and Bali, you can get massages for like $2. No, but you never stopped for a second to think about why that is, or you never stopped to think like, are these people ever going to leave their country? Like, here you are on your privilege of being able to travel. No, I don't have privilege. I'm Asian. I can't have privilege. What? privilege doesn't just come through whiteness. Like it comes in many forms.
It
Like
does.
we're not talking systemic. We're talking like there's all these other factors that go into it. I would say, for instance, being able to have American or like US bank accounts, US credit cards, my credit card points, I love so much. But I have that. I moved to France, for instance. So this is what happened. I meet my husband. He's never seen a system like this ever.
Mm.
He lives paycheck to paycheck. He was at the point where often, and he has like a good job as well, right? And he has social health care. He has everything. Oh my God, Western Europe has everything figured out, right? He like was buying literally like the crappiest food in the supermarket because he couldn't afford anything else. And it's not because he's bad at money, it's because a lot of people actually live this way in the country, right? You just don't hear
Mhm.
about their stories because they don't have access to the platforms that we
Right.
do. And so when I introduce this concept of like traveling through credit card points, he's like, "What's a credit card? And what do you mean you're given like free money, like you're given points?" And I just feel like that's a privilege. Do you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
that's a privilege. Like being able to travel and have mobility across Europe in ways that um, even local native born Europeans do not have. I'm not saying go like, pity all of them. I'm just saying like you have to have the awareness to know like what you have, what others don't, and also how that changes in the mix as you go place to place.
And to bring it kind of closer to home too, that's also a privilege for that people in America don't have. Like
Oh yeah,
they have access
exactly.
to it, but
Yeah,
they they've been denied
yeah,
the knowledge, the financial
yeah,
literacy to know how to use that
yeah,
access. It's a slippery slope. If you don't know what you're doing, it can put you in a lot of debt. But if you work it right, it can actually, like you said, give you a lot of rewards and benefits
yeah,
that are essentially free
yeah,
because you're going to be spending that money anyway.
yeah.
And if you manage your money right and all that.
I think about stuff like this a lot. I think like who I am today is the product of all the things I lived before. I was not beholden to them per se. I did make very conscious choices along the way, but that doesn't mean that if my life had gone a different way, which like who knows, maybe there are like different versions of us going through different things and turning into different people. I don't know. Something is beyond my
Like those
understanding.
decision books, every time
Yeah.
you made the other decision, it's
Exactly. It's
sprouted
another
off another
yeah, it's another
reality.
anyone who saw Loki, I'm a big fan of that theory. But I feel like yeah, so many things influenced me. So like we start with the fact that my mother's side of the family, there's a long history of religious persecution,
Mhm.
and therefore a long history of struggle, of survival, of I wouldn't say it's activism in the political sense because they didn't have the option under dynasties and dictatorships, but they did have the option to organize in communities because when religion is taboo, or not, sorry, it's not even taboo, is illegal and you could be put to death, it becomes a way of activism. Do you know what I mean? It
Mm.
becomes like a resistance movement. And that's also how it got so dogmatic and extreme for the generation of my mother, who only saw I think the ugly parts of it. So my mother, having been like ripped out of her life as a kid and then thrown into everything that was the Cultural Revolution, and then going into the States and again, like needing to survive, 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 and then ending up kind of, she wasn't just a tiger mother, she was literally like reproducing the same sort of things she had gone through because
Mm.
she knew it was like her duty to make kids, but she didn't know how to, I think, be a parent and be a mother. And she had never learned emotional anything,
Sure.
So like, even if her parents didn't treat her that way, she didn't know that what she was doing.
Mm.
And so she and I have gone through a lot, trying to like heal our relationship. And today we're in a totally different place. But I just feel like there's no way for me to know what was truly me and what was just the impact of all the factors surrounding me, but definitely this combination, right? Whatever
Mhm.
was inside of me, because like maybe there's a fair amount of like innate stuff, right? Like we can't name it perhaps, but like this energy, this spirit. I was a really shy kid. I was really, really scared of a lot of things because I was forced into stuff really early, like way unprepared. But I didn't show or explain what I was feeling. I was just processing it in my head. And anytime I saw something that was wrong, like let's say, I don't know, a kid being bullied, I was bullied a lot, but like if I saw it happening to someone else, never would I have thought, oh, let me go join the bully and
Right.
then like re-bully like this other kid because maybe it'll like validate me. I would have thought to do the opposite, and that's what I did. Right, I would try to find the other kid being bullied and being like, hey, let's be friends because like we don't need them, right?
Mhm.
And so that's always been, I think, what I can trace back as like injustice of any sort I've never been okay with. How I respond to that has changed over the years. So as a kid, I was too scared to, I was too small to, to like go fight off the bully. But then when I grew up, right, I became like an adult. That's where I started standing up for myself and other people, like vocally, physically, you
Mhm.
know, I'm stronger than I look. So yeah.
Do you feel comfortable talking about dating while Asian?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. It's very different for Asian women than Asian men, for sure. Do you feel like your experience fit the stereotype?
Yes. So I have dated not just in the US and not just in a couple different cities in the US, but also in other countries, right? And I do think that there is one, not all stereotypes are true, and many times stereotypes are oversimplifications, but yeah, no, this one checks. This
Uh,
one, at least for me personally, not with every person, not with every partner, but even when I dated Asian partners, checks out, you know?
mm,
Yeah. Even more so sometimes.
I feel like it's seen across the board with a lot of men is that they expect us to be very quiet and very
Yeah.
submissive and obedient.
How many Asian women actually in America fit that stereotype though, you know?
None of the ones that I
None of the ones
know.
I know. And like
Mm-mm.
I've had it projected on like like as an expectation onto me,
Mhm.
and those dates died right in the restaurant. Like I
Yeah.
no,
No.
like you chose the wrong, you swiped the wrong profile,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The especially as I've, like, grown, my network in the Korean adoptee community, like, all of the women that I've met are very outspoken, strong, like, independent, capable women who are like, "Fuck that."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know if it's an overcorrection from our generation because we grew up in that era where that was the expectation.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at some point, if you look back in our history, we were that quiet little Asian girl. I was up until a certain point, and then it was like something snapped, and it was,
Yeah, yeah, I think a lot of us were maybe as children, right? But
mm-hmm,
like it's also, or even if I look at my mother's generation, not her in particular, but like those who were born here at that time, so decades before, if perhaps they were quiet, submissive, were they actually that way on the inside? I don't know.
mm,
I think women have a long legacy, all women have a long legacy of being profiled into being, yeah, demure, submissive, quiet, obedient, a lot of other adjectives that we could put on it, but they were actively like working, I think, their minds. They were writing books. They were possibly not even using their real name and had a whole like
that's true.
other identity. And I think there's something to be said about the legacy of women always playing the role, the expected role externally, and men not having a freaking clue what was going on here and in like the secret lives that they held.
That definitely seems to be like the generation before
Yeah.
us or the one that raised us,
Yeah.
their mindset
Yeah.
because we're starting to hear more of those stories
Yeah.
now of
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
well, yeah, I played the part, but all of these things, look at it, that was
Yeah.
going on behind his back, he had no clue about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, how do you think being Asian influenced your relationships?
I was expected to not only date but marry a Chinese American man and have Chinese babies. I think that, like, growing up, I was literally told, which is ironic because my grandparents were from different parts of China. My mother was born in a different part because, like, everyone had to migrate from like war and everything else. And so technically, everyone's from a different place. And I was being told, no, you need to find someone from this place, like this village, like this ethnic, subtype. And they would all argue, and I was like, well, clearly it doesn't matter. Also, the chances of me, I'm like 5, right? And I'm like, chances of me finding someone like that in the DC metro area, like, who's also like a good person, are we thinking about that at all? No, we're not. So yeah, I feel like all of that really showed me like you should not just be listening to what your family like wants and just, the expectations that they set. And I never allowed them any insight into my dating life. I have some cousins who think that they know a lot about my dating life. They don't. I don't know who gave them that impression, but it's very interesting because no one, not a single family member knows like all the whole history. I have
Right.
friends who know, but yeah. So then it's just like, okay, you maybe you saw like some of the hits, like if it
Yeah.
like and like crashes, many crashes. But yeah, so I actually think being boxed in so much by my own culture and my own supposed people actually drove me to it wasn't rejection. It doesn't change that I am an Asian American female, but it made me want to learn more about who I would actually be compatible with. Thank you. All the I will try not to curse. The underdeveloped boys that I had to suffer through.
All the frogs.
Yeah.
One thing that I appreciate with your shares about your experience is how it does give light to the pressure of just being Asian, no matter what side you're on.
Mm,
Whether you were raised up in the culture or not,
mm.
there seems to always be this pressure of how much Asian you need to be.
Yeah.
Whether it's
Yeah.
you're not Asian enough or you're being too Asian because you don't want to stick out too much. Regardless of our differences, that does seem to be a common struggle, no matter how conscious we are of it. But why does it matter, really? Can
Yeah.
it not be more of your personal
Yeah.
feeling of it and what you're comfortable with? That's something that I've come to accept for myself anyway.
Yeah.
It's a spectrum.
Yeah. To put it in a little bit more again that like social context. I think that it happens when you are a minority in an area and you are forced to, like an area of the world, and you're forced to assimilate to some degree. And it can happen in a variety of ways, like even inside of Asia, it can happen, right? And so I think that what you fear is not only erasure, but you
Mm,
fear that like you as a parent perhaps did not do what was necessary to keep the legacy going,
right.
right? And so then that's when you put a lot of pressure, especially cultural pressure. So you brand it as culture, and then you basically say like, these are your roots, this is your heritage, this is your identity, and you are born as this, and we will try to protect this, which I think can come with good intentions, but it's often then kind of, I say, a prepackaged or boxed or kind of like bundled up, like, hey, this is what being Korean looks like.
Mhm.
And then, like, again, you have to like kimchi. We talked a lot about this, but it basically oversimplifies the experience of being your own individual person
Right.
and being a part of that culture. Because people who are born and raised inside of Korea, right, do not have to do this
Mm-mm.
because they can just be. They are subject to other things for sure. They are subject to like the internal tensions of that.
Right.
But yeah, they don't have to be doing this whole like Korea Independence Day. We're gonna eat us like so much kimchi. Why am I talking about this? Let's talk about like China stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's Chinese New Year. We have to do hot pot. We have to say these things. We have to do hongbao. We have to, like we have to like honor our ancestors, except for we can't because we're Christian. And so what we're gonna do is go to church instead because we're honoring our greatest ancestor, which is God. Like, it's just, like I feel there's all of this. There's a lot of this like what do you call, what is the word, like shoehorning a bit, like of,
Okay, yeah, yeah.
of like what culture means inside of a different social context, and it comes from generations that didn't have the tools to have conversations like these. And what
Mm,
they did instead was like, okay, my experience of being like a Chinese person and from this country, okay, that's what it is, and that's what I'm transmitting, and anyone who's not a part of this is not actually Chinese. And then they become super gatekeepy, and then it's like,
mm.
oh my god, guys, like we can you just imagine that maybe it doesn't have to be this way,
Right.
right? And I think that's why it often comes with a lot of emotions and a lot of they feel threatened because they feel like you're accusing them of not doing a good enough job of raising you.
Mhm.
And you see how over time, especially if raised inside of a Chinese family or an Asian family who's very traditional, you see how their criteria often shifts and changes because they like try to make space for like multiple truths, and so they're like, okay, it's okay if you don't date or marry a Chinese person, but they have to be Asian because like we'll broaden the condition to allow more flexibility, you know. And then they're like, okay, well, if not Asian, well, they have to speak Chinese, and then it's like, okay, so like you want a white guy that speaks, or like you want something like, you want, is it the language or is it, because my mother at one point was like, yeah, the person has to be able to communicate with your grandparents, and I'm like, but my grandparents never expressed needing that, you
Mm.
know. So that's very interesting that you're like using, my mother does this a lot, she uses other people's names, and she like plays it as some sort of like card, so she'll be like, your grandfather said this, and I'll go and talk to my grandfather who's passed by now, but like, you know, before, um and he was like, I didn't say that. And like she would do it also with about me, so she would tell my grandfather
Oh,
that I said something, and then he'd be like, oh, Michelle really wants to do this. I'm like, I never said that. Like, so yeah. Why? I think it's because of that, again, lack of education in many, many ways, lack of, I can't blame her for not having the tools before, but now that she's retired, my mother, right? She is working on it in a different way, and she's on her own little growth and healing journey, you know, that like
mm.
I'm giving a lot of space for, and it's become better as a result because I don't, I think she really did the best that she could with what she had.
Yeah,
And
that's
honestly,
fair.
she didn't have a lot,
Yeah.
you know? And if I were her and I was put in those circumstances, would I have been any different? I don't think so, honestly. Like, you know, I
Mm.
mean, I don't think I would have made the same exact choices. Maybe I would have gone less on the physical abuse and the domestic violence stuff. But I do think that you know, you think about what she went through in China, and all of a sudden a lot of things make a lot of sense. Like
Mhm.
why she thought that physical aggression was the only way to go,
Right.
and anger. And I mean, she was 10 when she was sent to the camp, you know? So like I was a gymnast. I was going to school. Like, you know, it's very different.
Right. The most challenging part, isn't it though? Reconciling with your parents' own human experience,
Yeah.
whether it be your mom or your dad or both, but understanding their why, especially once you have come to acknowledge how they were part of your trauma,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot easier to see what created their trauma
Yeah.
and how it presented in them and how they passed that down to you.
Yeah.
And like you said, y- the next step beyond that is to see and be able to ask yourself, would I have been able to do any better?
And be fair.
Yeah, with the resources that and the education,
Yeah.
right? Because that's one thing we have to consider. They did not have the knowledge and the wisdom that
Yeah.
we probably had at the age in
Yeah.
comparison, right?
And even today.
Right.
Yeah.
We grew up in a time where the internet was developed and we could network with people and
Yeah.
we could reach out to people. Even in West Virginia, I know that I had access to things that she did not
Yeah.
at my age.
Mhm.
And that's hard because there's that saying, like, it's their first time being a human being as well.
Yeah.
And that is true.
Yeah.
But multiple things can be facts at the same time, right? Like, they can be your trauma, but you can also acknowledge that they were just imperfect humans who were doing their best.
Yeah.
I do recognize that despite some of the things that happened with my parents, they were able to get me as far as they could removed from the trauma that they grew up in.
Mhm.
Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I think so. I think like I saw a post the other day. I think her handle is Pauline the psychologist or something like that. She does culturally informed trauma, and posts about it on Instagram. And she essentially, I love her stuff because it's just so nuanced, and it's exactly what's missing when we look at these topics. It was a post that said, just because your parents did not break the entire cycle, or they break certain cycles, doesn't mean they didn't break any.
Mm,
And I think
Yeah.
that a lot of children who have grown up in with um, I don't know, it's the whole spectrum of what parents look like, right? But let's just say unsafe households or like
Mhm.
unstable households and whatever. What does that mean? I just mean like emotionally volatile, right?
Sure.
But I feel that many times what we're told, especially in modern US society, it's like cut people off, right? And just like boundaries, yeah, like wall and no contact. Because if they really wanted to care about you, they had their chance. And then what you have, I mean, if that worked, I think that would be fine. But a lot of people are still suffering inside because what they want actually is not to cut off, they want a connection.
Mhm.
And then they kind of have this whole thing where you turn it on yourself and you're like, oh, but am I just, yeah, people pleasing, or am I just trying to have some sort of validation? And then it goes in a whole spiral and loop. And if you come from a collectivist culture, we talked about this yesterday off the record, but basically, this is the whole scheme or model of what you look like as a person is different than someone who didn't grow up that way. And collectivism is not only contained to Asians or Africans or whoever, people from certain parts of the world. It can also be in certain communities, even in the States,
Mhm.
where people have to rely on each other for,
Yeah.
like community based survival. And so I really feel like you do need to be able to step back and be like, my parent, so I grew up with one parent. My parent did the best that she could. She did what she thought was right. Even if it didn't work out and even if it wasn't right at the time, I have to recognize that it was literally in terms of what she tried to do. And she, what she was doing essentially was saying like, China did all these things to her. She wanted to put all this distance, right? But
Mhm.
she didn't see the patterns that she was reproducing in the name of that distance,
Mm.
which, you know what I mean? Like, and I think if you told her at the time, she wouldn't have been able to see it because she wasn't ready.
Oh, yeah.
And now we can have a very different conversation about it because she's now, gotten past it as well. Sometimes it's about, I think, their distance as well from the trauma.
Well, yeah, they have to process it
Yeah.
too, right? Like,
Yeah.
just as we had to process it to get to a point where we could discuss it without being emotional
Yeah.
or feeling triggered, I would imagine, especially with what your mom went through,
Yeah.
that's a pretty traumatic thing.
And like her parents also, it was worse.
Yeah,
Because they also got to go through the same things my mother went through, and also
and
like
raise a
many,
child in it.
yeah, like many
Yeah,
other like death and starvation and poverty and murder. Yeah, a lot of bad things.
yeah.
Jail, yeah, a lot of torture, yeah.
I go back and forth with the no contact stuff, but for me, it's not as simple as like I'm just not going to talk to them. I'm done. They've crossed too many boundaries. I mean, that is part of it, obviously. But for me, it becomes a point where this is no longer good for anybody
Hmm.
because you always hope that the other party can be what you wanted them to be
Hmm.
or become better or work on things or fix it. But I also believe that there just comes a point where there's not a lot of room for improvement
Yeah.
or the ability to make that improvement.
Well, both sides also have to do it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the hard part for me is trying to find that balance between trying to maintain that relationship because you don't want to cut people off so
Hmm.
easily, but also recognizing that they're not getting anything positive out of this relationship either.
Yeah.
It would be one thing if I was the only person suffering in this, but when I see that it's also putting stress on them, it's like, well, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Nobody's having fun
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So I have a tendency to like not necessarily go full no contact, but I
Mm.
do pull myself back
Oh yeah.
very drastically
Yeah.
and distance myself until we can go back to being surface.
But it also sounds like you know where your boundaries are, and people often, there's a lot of, I think, don't know if I would say it's misinformation. I just think it's not well understood what boundaries are. A lot of people say that
Mm,
like someone crossed your boundary, and there are a lot of psychologists now, like thankfully, putting out information like no one can cross your boundary because a boundary is what you set for yourself. It's about your movements, your actions, your
mhm,
behaviors, your reactions. You determine that. So if we talk about empathy, it also talk we also bring in the topic of forgiveness.
mm,
And I actually think that something really critical to mention about my how I manage my relationship with my mother is that I have no expectations from her because I have not forgiven, meaning like I condone what, her behavior towards me when I was young. However, I can't change the past. And I don't expect her to, so meaning boundaries. I stated boundaries for myself and I said, I do not want to put myself in situations where I'm attacked unnecessarily anymore.
Mhm.
Especially like there are a lot of things that happened over the years that really showed me like, yeah, you're never going to be here for me, are you? Like, you're never
Right.
going to be the support that I need. And at some point, I really just dropped all expectation of any traditional or conventional parenting, model. But then I also had to look at it and I was like, well, my mother wasn't the only adult in the household. I also had my grandparents there as like, I guess secondary caregivers. But in terms of me emotionally, they helped raise. So she like made sure, I don't know, I got to gymnastics practice and she organized the logistics of my life. Did she ever have a conversation with me about who I was, what I was dealing with? No, it was always like orders. It was always, you know what I mean? It was like a certain way of parenting that she, again, thought was good. Um, I talked a lot with my grandparents. They helped me develop my emotional side, my inner world, piece
Mm.
of me. And they dialogued on every single topic. There's no question too stupid, and they just I had two of them, right? And so I got to go between my grandfather, my grandmother, just like if they didn't see the same topic the same way, I'd be like, okay, like why? Can both of you just get together and explain to me? And I actually think I have them to thank for raising that sort of like I think inner confidence, knowing that I still know who I am and who I am as a person, even if my mother and I do not have or did not have, because we're still working on it, right? But even if we don't have a great relationship, I don't identify myself by the trauma inflicted on me by her.
Mm.
I identify myself based on what I've had to go through life, and that's a part of the story. But I have many pieces to that story.
Absolutely.
And I think that when I started realizing how to really stop waiting, I think it wasn't like I was holding out for her to be something, but I was just like, I mean, I also study psychology. So I was like really trying to like, find ways and use all the tools and tips and tricks and theories and trying to, implement them. But then realizing I had no control over her. I never had any control over her behavior. And that all I could do was decide for myself how I wanted to show up, stand in my own, truth of who I am,
Mhm.
move through life the way that I felt was going to be good for me, like healthy for me. But then at the same time, not allowing myself to attach to the toxicity of like bitterness and hatred and all that. And that's where the forgiveness came,
Yeah.
with like, I forgive you for not knowing better. I mean, it's very biblical, actually. It's very Jesus on the cross. But I think it's also, yeah, man, the church really like influenced a lot of my thinking, probably. But I think that there's also space that was created as a result because instead of engaging in every single fight and argument and being like, this is what you always do, you're never there for me, why is it that grandpa grandma can talk to me about these things and you can't, like you're supposed to be my parent, whatever, letting all that, just stepping away, I gave it like maybe 5 to 10 years of just like, yeah, like we kept in touch, but like, it was very superficial. It was very like arm's reach. And then after my grandfather passed a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now, which was just devastating for the entire family, just broke her, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that there was maybe more motivation for her to come to terms with herself a little bit more. I think for the first time, things were maybe quiet around her because I was
Mhm.
also, I live outside the country. My grandfather was the last living person for, in the family that was in the household. So she was alone
Yeah.
and she had to figure out like, what will she do now? Will she come to terms with the fact that she has to construct a new relationship with me? And that's been the work of the last like year, I would say.